welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Happy Sunday, everybody. I hope your weekend has been going great. I'm back at it with another video, and this is going to be the astro weather for the week of August 18th through the 25th, 2024. And today we're going to be taking a look at this up-and-coming Jupiter in Gemini square Saturn in the sign of Pisces. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Click that bell button below so you are aware of when I have new videos on the channel. We are here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday trying to make sense of what is going on in the cosmos. I know it has been a very big week, okay? So I hope all of you guys are thriving and doing well. This is kind of part 3 of all of these transits that have actually been taking place between planets in Pisces and planets in Gemini. So I'm sure a lot of this kind of sounds similar, but I'm going to be really taking a look at this kind of last final aspect that we're seeing between Mars or Jupiter square Saturn, and this is the final one. So if you guys have not seen those other videos, you can check out the Mars conjunct Jupiter in Gemini. You can check out also the you can also check out the Mars square Saturn video. So we have those two that are out. This is the final act that's taking place. This will be taking place this week. You're already probably feeling it because we've had so many planets that have been kind of jumbled in the sign of Gemini. And this will be the first of what will eventually be 3 Jupiter-Saturn squares, 2 taking place in mutable signs. So both this month as well as in December, we're going to see this take place between Jupiter in the sign of Gemini and Saturn in the sign of Pisces. And then next year, we're going to see the 3rd square between Jupiter and Saturn, but they will be in cardinal signs. It's actually going to be taking place between Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn and Neptune in the sign of Aries. So another video for another day, but certainly this is really important to kind of take a look at. Essentially, this is the final, finale, but really between these 2 particular signs. It has felt all month like there has been a tug of war between Saturn and Pisces and all of the big energies that have been in Gemini. Really hot conjunction between Jupiter and Mars, which has really been expansive, revving things up, trying to get us to think about communications and learning and traveling. And this week, Venus is in the mix. So we're going to see a pretty significant T-square involving the mutable signs actually, as well as the fixed signs with this incoming full moon in Aquarius. So it's making us all feel stretched. And obviously there's a lot of magnification going on anytime we see anything that is square to Jupiter. So how's everybody doing? Let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear some of your guys' Saturn square stories or your Mars Jupiter stories throughout this week. I warned you guys. I told you how last week was going to go. So hopefully you guys are doing well. And I wanted to start off this video by trying to kind of pay a little bit more attention to Jupiter. And I have what might be a bit of like a controversial theory, okay? So my theory is, what if this this Jupiter-Saturn square isn't as horrible as a lot of people make it out to be? I know a lot of you guys watch probably a ton of astrology content. Some of you guys probably are people who study astrology or you practice astrology. And you're going to hear a lot of different takes on this. And I think that's good because Jupiter's philosophy, it represents how we think in Gemini and how we write and communicate. And there's going to be some people who are going to sugarcoat it and tell you it's going to be amazing, it'll be fine, it's just going to take time for this thing to kind of work itself out. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you're going to have the very kind of Saturnian perspectives where people are going to be like, nothing's going to work, everything's going to get delayed, it's going to be terrible, don't waste your time, everything's going to, fall apart, or we're not going to have stability, or you're going to get sick. So I've been kind of thinking about it a little bit, and I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle on the transit. Granted, it hasn't happened yet, so we'll see. But I have a theory that whatever comes from this square throughout this next week, I think a little hard work, a little patience, and vision is actually going to pay off in a very, very big way. Okay, you guys know I always keep it real with you, but I'm actually a little bit more optimistic about this than I think most other people. What if there's a method to the madness of what's going on right now? I think that's the other thing to kind of consider. Mutable signs, they are about change, flexibility, making shifts, keeping an open mind, especially with Jupiter and Gemini. It's about considering other paths and different perspectives to get out of a blockage with that square to Saturn. So especially when I think about Jupiter being the dispositor, right? Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces. If you guys follow kind of traditional Hellenistic perspective, Jupiter is the traditional ruler there, and it represents the expansion of spirit, right? Spirit and anything revolving around metaphysics, our connection to the divine, angels, spirit guides, you know, our connection to something that is bigger than us. And it also deals a lot with religion and practice and spirituality and meditation and all that stuff. But Jupiter in the sign of Pisces is in its feminine version, you know, in contrast to Jupiter in Sag, which is kind of fiery and feisty and kind of traveling and teaching. So Jupiter connected to Pisces is much more about there being no bounds, right? There being no limits to what we can feel. And I think that this square is kind of, it piques my interest because I feel like Jupiter being the dispositor of Saturn, there's some method to the madness. And I do think that, you know, it may actually be a really good thing that plays out for us. Maybe not right now, but in the future. So more on that in a second. But just to put it simply, you know, with this aspect, we're simply making adjustments, right? That's what we're doing. And this is actually stemming from December of 2020, when we saw Jupiter come into conjunction with Saturn at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So that was the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. We had expansion, Jupiter in obviously Aquarius, expanding collective groups. We saw everybody get on Zoom. We saw a huge kind of, I think, like boom in the astrology world. We saw so much about networking and connecting and friendships. And then Saturn brought the restriction. It brought that limitation of not always being able to socialize or go places or connect, but we can get on an iPhone, a tablet, what have you. So I think about the seeds that were planted at the end of 2020 in our own lives and what we were initiating, getting used to a new normal when it comes to, I think, kind of connecting with society. Yes, there were some limits and some pitfalls, but in some weird way, it did bring some people together. It really did shift a lot of people's perspective and philosophy about the world and where we are all going collectively on the internet in terms of environmentalism. And that was ushering in a whole new series of conjunctions that would be taking place in the element of air. So it's intellectual, right? It's about learning, exchanging, sharing, and it's a little abstract. So much more complex than, you know, kind of cookie cutter astrology where you listen to a forecast and it goes, well, Jupiter squares Saturn this week, you're going to kind of get stuck in traffic. Maybe that happens, right? But this is a part of a bigger picture. So pause the video, okay? Go and grab your natal chart. Take a look at what was going on in your transits at the end of 2020, specifically right around kind of the second half of 2020. It was right around, I think, the 20th or the 21st when this conjunction happened, but it was kind of playing out that whole month. Then I want you to think about, or maybe after this video, go back and reflect a little bit about what became the new normal for you, what became the new standard, right? Saturn kind of sets a standard for your beliefs, right? And I want you to think about what you've been working on in the Aquarius area of your chart since, you know, that time last year. I mean, oh my gosh, we're coming up on 3.5, almost 4 years since we had this conjunction. So now we have the opening square. Anyway, the question really is this week, what are we willing to step away from in order to grow and bring in much, much more? Right? I think of Jupiter being the great benefic. It is about abundance. It is about wealth, riches, but also richness in a sense of the mind. Because remember, the conjunction started in an air sign. Now it's squaring in an air sign. So it's still trying to get us to focus on communication and exchange, less in a Saturn-Uranian way, more in a Gemini way, which is like, let's get information out there. Let's have dialogue. Let's discuss. Let's kind of go back and forth and exchange. So I'm calling this week blessings in disguise. That's how I'm choosing to look at it. It may not seem like a blessing this week because we have some very heavy astrology still playing out with that full moon that's coming in. But the key word here is strategy, okay? It's going to be about strategy and being able to overcome and also be patient and know how to schedule our lives, how to set goals, how to exercise sustained growth. So we're not doing it too quickly, so that way we can maintain some of the changes that we're actually going to be making. Now, it's Sunday. A lot of us are either off of work or school or our unnecessary kind of daily routine. So I figured I'd throw this in here and give you a little bit of story time, some mythological story time on Jupiter and Saturn, because I think this is going to add a whole other layer to really looking at this square between the two planets. Now, depending on if you follow Greek or Roman mythology, Jupiter is known as Zeus in Greek mythology. So if you follow Roman mythology, Jupiter is Jupiter, but it can also be known as Zeus. Saturn, on the other hand, is Kronos in Greek mythology. Okay, so we've got Saturn and we've got Jupiter, and they are father and son. So Jupiter was actually Saturn's son. And the stories of the mythology behind the two of them are really interesting because really it's about a story of power, abuses of power, betrayal. It can also be about cycles that change between generations, where you're looking at the new king coming in, some kind of expansion, anything is possible, you know, kind of bright and optimistic Jupiter. And Saturn, which is about the old way, tradition, what we've always done, older generations, and the clash of these two particular titans. So just like a little bit on, you know, the story of these two. So Saturn was basically one of the titans, and this was like the OG group of all of the gods. And Saturn was known for swallowing his children. I'm sure some of you guys have seen some of that art throughout history. Now his children was Uranus and Gaia. So we have Uranus, which was considered to be the sky, and Gaia was considered to be the earth. Essentially, Saturn overthrew his father and, you know, Uranus at Gaia's behest because Uranus had imprisoned the Cyclops, their siblings, and the Taureans. So they already kind of had beef going back. Basically, Kronos, or Saturn, became the ruler during the Golden Age and at a time of peace and prosperity. However, there was an oracle that prophesied to Saturn that he would be overthrown by one of his children, just as he had overthrown his own father. Okay, so time out. Saturn cycles, right? It can be about karma. It can be about dealing with older kind of relatives, parents, you know, people who we can feel like are leaders or sometimes superiors in some way. So an oracle told him, hey, what you did to your dad, same thing's going to happen to you. So when he had children, this is Saturn now, when Saturn had children, to prevent this prophecy from becoming true, he swallowed his children as they were born, all right? And he had a wife, her name was Rhea, depending on how you pronounce it, and she managed actually to save Jupiter, Zeus. And she did this by tricking Saturn into swallowing a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes that Jupiter was actually wearing, and he thought it was Jupiter. So, you know, he ended up escaping. When we look at the birth of Jupiter and his escape, he was actually hidden in a cave on Crete, and he was raised by various deities, including nymphs, like little fairies. And also there was a goat that took care of him and kind of nursed him while he was a child. Now, eventually Jupiter grew up, right? And he was forced basically to kind of deal with the, I guess, like psychological effects of what happened to him when he was younger. He felt the need to kind of come back and save his other siblings that had been swallowed by Saturn. So he gave Saturn a potion, and basically he ended up regurgitating his siblings, and it ended up leading to a war, basically, where there was like a clash between the Titans, which was ruled by Saturn, so these were the old gods, and also the Olympians, which was led by Jupiter, who was like all, you know, some of them were siblings, and it was like, you know, the younger kind of generations, and they ended up facing off. So eventually, Jupiter had help. He wasn't by himself. He had Cyclops, He also, this is where Jupiter or Zeus got his thunderbolts. They were given to him. And him and his siblings ended up winning. They overthrew Saturn, and then Zeus decided, or Jupiter, decided that he was going to divide the world up, and he was going to give certain aspects of the world to his various brothers. So we had Poseidon, who is also known as Neptune in Roman mythology, who ended up getting to rule over the oceans and the seas. We had Hades, which was also known as Pluto, and he, got to rule the sky and also the underworld. And there was another brother in there too. I'm trying to remember all of them, but essentially they all had different areas that they were able to rule over, and then they were able to balance all of those energies out. So long story short, when we think about this particular square, right, it's going to mirror that kind of mythology. We're going to see themes in the outer world and in our own world that's going to be about cycles of power in our jobs, in our relationships, out in the world and society. And I really feel like this particular myth is seen as like a metaphor for the necessary changing of the guards. That has to happen. These cycles that have to kind of cycle through. So we have growth, and then we also have periods of things kind of breaking down, and we have decay. But this is also a story about betrayal and prophecy, because both, Saturn as well as Jupiter, they were both very driven by prophecy. They were both given some kind of advice or predictions about how their life would play out. Obviously, Saturn went against that, and I think he was the story really highlights the inevitability of fate and struggling against fate. So perfect for this because, our belief system, what keeps us going in the morning, whether these are the things we're praying for or the things we believe in, or it can just be our own personal philosophy, that is Jupiter. And with the square to Saturn, it means that, are we trying to, be too optimistic about what can happen? Does it mean that we're potentially looking at things going, I'm trying to defy the stars, but I feel like I just can't win? I don't know. And then I think also about the theme and the lesson of justice, because that's a big theme when you think about Jupiter. But, essentially Jupiter's rule was coming in and establishing some sense of new order, where he was going to ensure that there was going to be justice and also law, and that there would be more, kind of central contrasting themes that would be coming up, where there would be more balance rather than being more chaos and limitations and kind of feeling kind of, stuck or tied down as when Saturn was ruling. So the relationship between these two, I think, are really important to understand when you look at the square, because you're going to potentially see this play out in real life. And I'm going to give you a number of examples, but it could be quite literal. We don't have to look at it as, oh, Gemini, is TV and communications and Saturn is limitation. It could be, well, I quite literally am having a struggle with my sibling, because Gemini has siblings, it can be cousins, it can be neighbors. I am having a difficult time, communicating and talking to my boss about something. I don't know how to address it, or I'm not really getting along with my father right now, and there could be some tension that could be going on in certain family relationships as, sons are getting older and they're kind of growing up and they're evolving and going and figuring their lives out. And they have these, brand new beliefs and philosophy about the world, which may clash with an older parent or relative. So these things can actually reflect very, very much what the story of this mythology says. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about Saturn and Pisces, which we've done a lot. And like full disclosure, some of you guys are probably like, yeah, I know, I've been hearing about it all week. So in a nutshell, Saturn represents boundaries, borders. It is about karma. It's about limits, but it's about testing that. Usually when Saturn leaves a sign, he'll leave a gift. And that will pertain more into your natal chart. So when it leaves a certain house, you'll kind of see, hey, you know what? After 2.5, 3 years, I'm actually stronger in that area of life. I'm more successful. I'm more capable. And that's eventually what we will see. But for right now, Saturn in Pisces is very much kind of connected to spiritual and emotional reckoning, right? Because Pisces is a water sign. Slippery having Saturn, which is usually solid, in a mutable water sign. And I think really, when I think about Saturn in Pisces, this transit really brings up a collective focus on spirituality, okay? It could be about religion. It could be about culture. Yes, I think it's those things as well. But definitely spirituality, emotional healing, and also Pisces is a sign that needs introspection. So, there could be this societal push towards understanding deeper truths, especially depth. We think of Pisces, there's a lot of depth there. Facing illusions, dealing with collective grief or loss. And that's something that just naturally happens with Saturn and Pisces. This is also about institutional reforms. Saturn wants to form or build something solid. Right now, Saturn is retrograde. So when we see Saturn in Pisces every 28, 30 years, institutions, especially those dealing with health, spirituality, or welfare, generally undergo some sense of significant reform. And this can be hospitals, it could be revolving around taking care of the homeless community, dealing with mental health issues. It can be with prison reform. And also a lot of it is connected to immigration because Saturn deals with borders. So I do expect that we're going to see more of this discussion because of the squares to Jupiter. I think it's really going to involve reevaluating how society cares for its most vulnerable, and also how we're addressing mental health issues and addiction as a society. Now, boundaries comes up with Saturn, compassion comes up with Pisces. So I do think this is about boundless compassion. Saturn's, presence in the sign, it does enforce boundaries. And I do think it's about teaching society where compassion needs structure in order to be effective. So this could lead to policies or movements that, balance empathy with practicality. Do we open everything and give everything for free? Does that actually work? Does that sustain, particular countries or governments? Does it make sense to close everything down? And is that too isolating, closed off? Does that actually not solve some of our problems and kind of create, an even bigger issue? I think these are things that are kind of being weighed right now with Saturn and Pisces. It definitely brings up karmic lessons. You can't talk about Saturn without karma, so that's definitely a theme. And when I say karma, karma is neutral. It's neither good nor bad. It's just the result from our past life doings, if you believe in that, or what we were doing, literally the last time that we saw Jupiter and Saturn in conjunction at the end of 2020. The decisions we made collectively in our own lives, in our relationships, with our goals, with our friends. So this is the theme that we're going to be kind of dealing with. And I think on a general level, it's about really revisiting past mistakes. And, kind of working through karmic cycles, especially how society treat each other and the environment. So it could manifest as a call for more sustainable practices or a reckoning with historical injustices that have happened previously, okay? It could go back to other squares that we've seen in the past. Finally, also, Pisces is a sign that's very much associated with art and expression and culture. So having Saturn in this sign, it definitely brings a surge of art and music and literature. It's going to probably create some really significant films, albums, things like that. And it's really going to be exploring themes of loss and redemption. And the search for meaning, I think Saturn's introspective journey through Pisces definitely has us all taking a little bit more time to pause and reflect and kind of ask ourselves, is this making me sad? Have I really let this go? Is it time to kind of heal this? And also kind of feeling all of the energies together because Pisces kind of represents all of us collectively. Now, when we think about Jupiter in Gemini, and it will be there up through kind of like the spring or early summer of 2025, Jupiter could not be more different than Saturn, right? Think of Saturn as tightening the belt and Jupiter's like, everything's out, we're ready to go. Let's go quickly, let's go fast, and let's explore and be optimistic about what the future holds. Certainly, Jupiter in the sign of Gemini is about intellectual expansion. That's bottom line. That's the most kind of simple description I can give you. In this transit, we do see that there generally is widespread interest in learning and communication and exchange of ideas. That's what Gemini is all about. We do sometimes see educational reforms here, new learning platforms happen, or there can be like a renaissance happening in literature and journalism that may be highlighted. And that might be books that are, being written now, that we're seeing a return of blogs and blogging and newsletters and all kinds of stuff like that. But I also feel like there is a sense of needing to reflect on the past with the square to Saturn. And so I do think that there's going to be a lot of people being like, hey, didn't I read that book in middle school? Like I should go back and read that book again. Like there seems to be some weird synchronicities and it seems really significant, you know, in this time. I think it's also going to be a lot of people talking about why there are certain banned book lists, why you were reading something, you know, 20, 25 years ago that you can no longer see in a modern day library. And I think for me, that's like the big one, that there's probably going to be more people kind of talking about that and going and referencing books or trying to find books or specific editions of books that they may not be able to find now. This is also about social connectivity. So obviously, you know, Jupiter is about expanding and Gemini is very social, being an air sign. So generally Jupiter in this sign, we see an increase in social interactions. There's more networking, there's rise of new communication technologies, platforms, apps, these kinds of things. And it can mean that there's more global conversations, perhaps even movements or protests that spread rapidly through social media. Now, in order to understand what's happening here, we actually have to look at what's going on with Mercury, because Mercury is the dispositor. So as the square is coming through, Mercury is the ruler and it's retrograde, coming in hot. We're getting ready to see that Cazimi, where there's going to be some kind of grand announcement or big realization. In the sign of Leo, it's about what leadership is really made of and how leaders out in the world or in your own life really choose to communicate. Leo is a sign that's super bold. It's very charismatic. It's very creative. It knows how to kind of put on a show. So I think a lot of this communication and talk is going to be putting the spotlight on certain individuals. But I do feel like, you know, this theme of Jupiter being in Gemini really also brings up the discussion of diversity of thought. Like I said, 2 options, 2 choices. Gemini is a double-bodied sign. So it is encouraging us to explore different perspectives, which could lead to a collective push for more inclusive dialogues, understanding different cultures and embracing diversity of opinions. And we all know what opinions are like. Everybody's got one. And certainly the square to Saturn means that there are some opinions that are being kind of clamped down on, and then there are some that are kind of like really being, magnified, and, you know, we're cranking the volume up on certain people. I'm neutral on that. I think that, I've certainly seen my fair share of things this last week with the Jupiter-Mars conjunction, and it played out exactly how I thought. And then as soon as I started seeing the squares to Saturn, I was like, sometimes silence speaks louder than words. And if we are just talking over each other as Mars and Jupiter are in conjunction and not practicing restraint and tolerance and patience and not saying hateful things, there are some people that just want to hear that continue. And if you don't participate, then that can also kind of bring it down a little bit. I don't know. But we're definitely going to see the theme about being able to have more open dialogue. And I think open dialogue is a good thing. We need to be able to do that. You guys have heard me talk about this before. I'm a huge supporter of free speech. I think it's really important. I've gotten some slack for that recently. And to be honest with you, I don't really care. So that's the conclusion that I've come to, that everybody's going to have their own opinion. Astrology is kind of like being an author. You're going to write books about a certain topic. You're going to be able to go in depth, or you can kind of be as surfacey as you want. Your tone is going to differentiate depending on, you know, who's writing it. Astrology is the same way. So you're going to have to find an author or somebody that you like that's going to be able to explain the story to you in a way that is digestible. And obviously right now it's a pretty controversial thing to ask questions and speak your mind. And I'm not going to apologize for that, because I feel like that's not really necessary. Part of what I do is I create. This is me creating. This isn't me just, you know, kind of regurgitating information at you guys. Sometimes it can kind of seem like that because it gets a little heady, but this is a creative expression of my work. And I am so thankful for people who watch it, who like it, who share it, who give me comments, whether they're good or bad, because I'm of the opinion that any attention is good attention at this point. And I will leave it at that. All right, so legal and educational shifts. So that's a thing, because Jupiter represents laws. And so this could be writing laws, this could be talking about future laws. And we definitely see changes with the mutable signs. So we might see these changes aimed at broadening rights revolving around educational opportunities. There could be more focus on international law or treaties, even with importing or exporting or trade. We may even see a shift towards more innovative methods when it comes to education, especially incorporating technology. I think that's going to be a big theme. And then finally, Jupiter. You can't talk about Jupiter without philosophy. So we are going to see kind of like a real blossoming of new philosophical perspectives, and definitely lots of expansion when it comes to ideas. So there's definitely going to be an uptick in discussions, new ideologies, even religious movements that emphasize intellectual freedom and the quest for knowledge, right? So that's going to be the theme. Now squares, especially this one. So this is an opening square. So that means that this is the first kind of reaction, or let's say kind of like wave, from some of the stuff that we see in the end of 2020. Squares are the energy of Mars. It is creating a 90-degree angle, which is kind of like a blunt energy that is going to be merging these two together. So if we have Jupiter that says, let's make it bigger, let's do more, let's explore, and Saturn says no, this is that meeting of the minds that is taking place. And it makes us feel limited in some way, likely due to changes that we have to make. Now that may be work, school, relationships, our schedule, our way of thinking. And I think with Saturn squares, there is a tendency to be this feeling of, I got delayed, or I hit a wall, or, you know, I'm blocked creatively, or I don't know how to kind of share this information or how to get started. Some of that will be from fear, right? And not emotionally feeling ready yet, or feeling unsure about being able to kind of step forward, or maybe we're still kind of wrapping up some loose ends. And I think with Jupiter being so optimistic and Saturn being so grounded and focused on reality, when these two square, it's important to recognize that we can't be too overly optimistic this week, right? We can't, you know, you can shoot for the moon. If you missed, you're still going to land among the stars at some point. But there is like a not wanting to count your chickens before they hatch vibe to this. There is also a sense of really strategizing and planning and looking before you leap, because there can be some false starts that can come with this as well. The whole purpose of Jupiter square Saturn is so Jupiter does not expand too quickly. I always look at it as, you know, this Saturn is kind of throwing a lasso around Jupiter and Mars, which is hilarious because, well, you know, Jupiter is horses, it's associated with Sag. Mars could be like wild Mustangs. So there is this sense of kind of being like, whoa, we really need to kind of hold our horses this week in the Gemini area of our life, because we need to kind of come up with strategy, a plan, or something that is going to be sustainable. Otherwise, we're going to burn out overly quickly. So long story short, know that this is going to be a week where on a level, I think, with society, we may be seeking knowledge, not just for its own sake, but for a deeper understanding of spiritual growth. I think that's the whole theme of whenever you're dealing with Pisces or Jupiter. And we're really learning how to do that with Saturn's push for depth. If you're going to learn something, go all the way, right? Don't just kind of, you know, take the surface level. No, go deep. Make sure you really feel your way into it, and it needs to resonate. It needs to be something that really kind of sits with your soul in an appropriate way. This is also going to be about communication of deep truth, right? Depth, Pisces, truth is Jupiter, and Mars has been there. So something's been kind of building up. I think that there is this feeling of wanting to communicate something profound, wanting to share our spiritual beliefs or our truths in some capacity, our insights. And it can be leading to movements or media that blend intellectual and emotional or spiritual content. So we can definitely see a lot of moving visuals and music and things that really kind of pull at your heartstrings. It could also be like commercials and things like that. This is also about challenges in communication, because anytime you see Saturn square anything in Gemini, it's kind of like a either don't you say anything, or I'm not sure if I am ready to talk about this yet, or there being some blocks in communication. There's some limitations, you know, your call drops, or you know, your computer is kind of older and it's not processing so quickly, so you're having a hard time being able to kind of send the messages. So definitely challenges in communication, which is a given considering Mercury's retrograde, and we're getting ready to see. Actually, you're seeing it as you're watching this today. The second Mercury square Uranus. Hopefully, you guys have internet as this is coming out. We'll see. The pre-shadow was pretty wild. So there can be some major issues with communication. I think with Jupiter and Gemini, it wants to spread ideas widely. It wants to just put it out there, right? Sometimes it doesn't think before it talks. And then we have Saturn's influence, which is kind of really highlighting where communication fails or where it needs to be structured or more thoughtful, right? And then finally, there's a reevaluation that happens with squares. And thankfully, mutable signs do squares a little bit better because they're open to change. But I think this is a reevaluation of social structures. So, these transits are leading to a complete reeval of how society communicates, how we learn, and how we're structuring our emotional and our spiritual life, leading to, I think, some pretty significant shifts and reforms. And that could be with media, that could be with religious practice, that could be with travel, that could be with free, issues revolving around free speech. All of these things I think are going to be up for debate throughout this next week or so. So when I look at the this versus that, because that's kind of the archetype of the square, two people kind of getting in a ring and getting ready to duke it out, especially with Jupiter and Saturn, I think of truth versus withholding of information, or not saying anything, omission, right? Saturn isn't necessarily lying. That's not what I'm saying. It's just more omission of something. It's omitting certain informations, facts, figures, not making it visible. And Jupiter says, I want the information, especially conjunct Mars. I want to talk about it right now. And then Saturn gets kind of evasive. So there could be this truth versus omission. And some people are of the frame of mind that omission is lying. That's your own, that's your own kind of journey there. But then we have communication versus silence. And it can be somebody who wants to talk about something, who's like, let's handle it, let's work through it. And Saturn is giving the silent treatment. It's the dead fish. Saturn is retrograde, so it doesn't want to look at it. It doesn't want to deal with it. It's, it's wanting to kind of evade any sense of responsibility, or it doesn't want to kind of be the grown-up right now. It doesn't have the strength that it would typically have if it was direct. Granted, Saturn is in a superior position, so with Jupiter coming into the square, especially with Mars, it's been very powerful, and there's been this sense of not saying anything. I think it's interesting that this has been building up over the last, 2 weeks or so, and we've seen certain people of authority who are evading the press. And that's quite literally this, Gemini's journalists. It's people who are asking questions. They have microphones, they have tablets. They're, trying to kind of get their stories and their articles written that they need to publish. And they're asking these questions, and they're coming in heated. And Saturn retrograde is like, nope, we're not taking any questions. No, we have nothing to say. No comment, or, not right now, or not for the rest of the month. That's astrology in action. So I think that this square now is resulting in people being like, is that something that we want to see? Now people are going to be talking about it. If we feel like we have certain people in positions of leadership, why aren't they leading, or why aren't they showing up or being on camera, or why aren't they coming to the meetings? And this could be in your own life. I'm just using out in the world as an example, but this is one of those situations where the astrology is pretty much bang on with what's happening right now. I also feel like this is about supply and demand, okay? And that's something else that I haven't really touched on in previous videos because I wanted to wait until the Saturn-Jupiter square, but, Jupiter says, I want more. Give me more. Give me as much as you have. I'll take anything you can get. So it's wanting to have this increased supply of media, information, streaming things, podcasts, blogs, anything revolving around communications, debates. It's really kind of heating up. But it could also be, I want sugar, I want to travel, I want to buy a new car, I want to start a new language, anything like that. And so there is this sense of wanting growth in the Gemini area of our chart, really kind of craving it, and maybe needing more. This could also be bringing up themes revolving around delays in mail, delays with packages, delays with travel, especially, connected to rental cars, or, packages being delayed because we have extreme weather in parts of the world. And I say that because the square to Saturn represents the supply.
And Saturn retrograde says, sorry, we're all out of that. We don't have any more. Or, you know, we don't have anybody to be able to get the package there for, oh, another 4 days. So it's going to be delayed. And I know you want it now and you want to rush it, but I'm telling you it's going to be delayed. We're going to see some of this stuff. And I think the delays would be with flights, you know, driving and traveling to some places. Keep in mind that Saturn in Pisces is about flooding. I saw some crazy flooding videos in Utah just this week where you see like on social media where somebody's standing there and you see water kind of coming through the windows, and like water is like probably about an inch or two on the floor. And then the water just busts through the bedroom window and the whole house floods. And I've seen some crazy flooding videos in China and other places. Astrology isn't just about what we have here, especially if you're an American. This is global themes, but I think we're going to hear more about impacts of traveling pertaining or connected to weather. But also keep in mind that this is ruled by Mercury, okay? And Mercury is retrograde. So it could be a reviewing or a kind of return of some significant, you know, creative person where they're, you know, finally coming out and performing, you know, after not being seen for so many years. Something else I saw, there's a bunch of performing bands and artists and stuff that are all canceling or postponing their tours. There's like a laundry, I mean, there's like 20, 25 plus creators. If you guys follow me on X, follow me at BTV Astro. I'll find it and I'll repost it. But there's like a whole list of people who are suddenly postponing their performances. This is something I talked about in the Mercury retrograde video. I said when Mercury went retrograde in the sign of Leo, which is performers, creators, and it's squaring Uranus, we're going to be hearing that people are having to refund tickets. We're not going to see certain performers, stuff like that. So I think that maybe is part of it as well. But it could be for a lot of us kind of saying, you know what, I really want to get back into doing this hobby. I want to do something creative. I want to make time for my kids. I want to make time for dating. And we're kind of feeling like, okay, we have to be a little bit more creative and open-minded with how we can kind of balance things and create more time, right? And certainly Saturn in Pisces is not great for time management because a lot of us are either losing sleep or we're overworking or we're up all night or we're kind of, our eyes are locked on screens, that it's making it incredibly hard to focus, especially with Mars conjunct Jupiter. There could just be so much going on in the news that everybody is so consumed with the constant headlines that are coming out that it's really hard for us to be able to find any time for joy, right? For pleasure, for creativity. So that's also part of this. But supply and demand, we're going to see probably some shortages. It could be issues revolving around cars. I remember telling you guys like 6 months ago, I was like, watch what happens to the auto market at the end of summer. Like you guys are going to get some really good deals on cars when Jupiter and Saturn start squaring and Mars and Saturn start squaring, because this is vehicles. So, I mean, it depends on where you live and what you're looking to buy. But yeah, we're seeing like some crazy deals and markdowns on vehicles for 2024 vehicles that have not left the lot. They cannot be sold. They're way too expensive. And now a bunch of people can go and get some pretty decent deals on some vehicles if that's something you want to do after the retrograde. And then finally, everybody's favorite topic. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but conservatism versus liberal beliefs. You know, Saturn is conservative. It is cautious. It is about, you know, kind of doing things the try and true, the old way, what can be seen as a little stuffy and, you know, maybe something our parents or our grandparents used to do, but something that we may not agree with. And then we've got Jupiter, which is, like I said, new ideas. I want to do this. And it's very bold and courageous with Mars being there. This is about laws. It's about also war and conflict because Jupiter is conjunct Mars. It could represent certain select groups of people who are extremely loud about opinions and beliefs, and it can be combative. That's just the astrology. And Saturn, you know, is retrograde. So if we were to look at this from the clash that's going on with the left versus right, which is, in my opinion, nobody wins because I don't think that politics are that simple. But this does talk about the clash. And there's been a lot of criticism for whether or not certain conservative candidates have been doing enough, if they've been showing up enough, if they've been, you know, participating in things enough and like really being visible and being out there, versus the contrasting energy of direct Jupiter, which is on the road, traveling, you know, talking in front of all kinds of people, and Mars, which is like very confident and very assertive. So, you know, anytime I see Jupiter and Saturn square, I know if I go back and I look throughout history, it always represents a time where there's a major clash and a major divide between, you know, rivals or political parties, or some real stark, you know, contrast that's going on between changes in the market, where we're seeing major shifts between, you know, a bull market and a bear market. Very rarely do we see something that's in the middle. We don't really see a lot of base anything with Saturn and Jupiter square. It's just all or nothing. And so they're kind of fighting it out here between now really and next year, but we're going to see the next square, you know, closer to Christmas. And we have the next 5 months basically to integrate. So, you know, whatever is kind of happening now, even though it's tied to what we started in 2020, we're going to feel that expansion and contraction this week. And we have about 4 or 5 months to integrate, to strategize, and to plan. Now, for those of you guys who are like, okay, this is great information, but what do I do with this? Well, recognize the conflict between expansion and restriction in your own life. And only you can see that by looking at your chart. The Gemini area wants to grow. It wants to go rapidly. It is like a dog pulling on a leash this week. And Saturn is kind of sticking back and kind of watching the situation and observing and trying to see whether or not Jupiter is capable of governing himself. And may possibly be doing that because he's going to let Jupiter kind of run wild. Now, you guys will see when we have the second square at the end of this year, Jupiter's going to be retrograde. Saturn's going to be direct. So it's going to be reversed. It's almost going to feel more challenging to push things forward at the end of this year. So you want to kind of work with this one now the best that you can. Just be open to new knowledge, communication, and social interactions. You know, I think that if we recognize that there's a tug of war going on in our chart, and we explore new ideas in Gemini, and we're able to really kind of reflect on what we've been learning, we can kind of find a way to meet in the middle. In order to do this, we have to start differentiating the difference between reality and fantasy. And God bless the internet. Not a lot of people really know how to do that. And rightfully so, because everything is distorted. Everything is manipulated. Things are edited. They are put into some kind of AI machine, or, you know, like whatever. Like, we're seeing it all across the board. Everybody's participating in it. Everybody's commenting on it. A lot of people are falling for it. So it's a hard thing to do. Quite literally, Saturn in Pisces is going to be about limits revolving around visions and film and photos and anything that can be manipulated. And so Jupiter is going to make that seem even bigger. That's why we're seeing so much crazy conspiracy stuff going on, and people who are claiming such crazy things is really because of this square. But in our own lives, there is a push towards facing reality because of Saturn and Pisces, especially in areas of our life where there are illusions and escapism that we have not been checking. Jupiter is going to encourage, you know, flights of fancy and intellectual escapades, and the Saturn square could be bringing these back to Earth, asking for practical application and grounding, which I actually think is a good thing. I think it's a good thing to kind of check some of this stuff because people can kind of be kind of running away with things right now. The positive in all of this is that it does produce learning and growth through these challenges. Like I said, there is a method to the madness. These things are happening for a reason. And I think a lot of it is because the transit's really highlighting where, you know, growth comes because of limitations. We're able to overcome that. We're able to kind of hike up that hill. When we get to the top, we're like, wow, look at what I was able to achieve. So yes, we're going to face some obstacles, and there's going to be some lessons learned along the way, and things probably won't feel like they're going as expected, but at least we're prepared. We have that knowledge and the awareness not to kind of rush through things, that we need sustained growth in order to make some of these new goals really kind of last or produce some kind of fruit. So basically, watch for issues that can come up with miscommunication. There may be a need to have more serious discussions and kind of like less frivolous interactions. I think we're going to see this in, you know, a lot of social and kind of communication dynamics as well. and expect there to be a lot of disagreements. I think a lot of people are going to be more, everything's fine, everything's going great, we're going to be just fine. And then there's going to be people who are going to come in with that heavy, we're all doomed, you know? And the important thing is to recognize that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle right now. I don't think it's one way or the other. And it doesn't benefit us to have extreme polarizing views with either side of that as well. Now, what you want to make sure you're not doing during this particular period, okay? And I'm not crazy, like, you know, my mentor always said to me, she'll never tell me what I should or shouldn't do. And I didn't realize that until I really started getting into my work and working with clients. And I always catch myself from saying, you should do this or you should do that. So here are some things that I would recommend watching out for and potentially not participating in, because if you can kind of avoid these pitfalls, it's going to get a little bit easier for you. Watch for overcommitment, okay? Because Mars and Jupiter in Gemini is like throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. And I love the enthusiasm and the energy, but it can sometimes feel a little scattered. And I think Saturn is checking that. So there can be a tendency to take on too many projects or ideas. You could be, you know, just trying to do too many things at once, working too many jobs, you know, just trying to multitask, and it can get you into some trouble. Yeah, I think Saturn is basically going to, you know, demand that something is managed or reduced, okay? Managed or reduced, and it will have some emotional benefits. Watch for missteps in communication. I've said that a couple times, but there's generally a tendency towards, you know, kind of superficially spreading yourself too thin in communication as well, which Saturn could challenge by bringing up misunderstandings and make you actually go a little bit deeper into the conversation, have more thoughtful exchanges. Here's an example. You know, if you're just giving those 1 or 2 word texts as a response, somebody could very easily take that personally. They could be spilling their heart out to you over a text message, and you could be like, okay. And somebody's going to be like, ah, you know, you're not giving me that response that I need. You're just, you know, you're acting like you're listening, but you're not listening. I'm not getting anything from you. We've all had those conversations where maybe you're out to lunch with a friend, or you're hanging out with a coworker, and you're having a conversation, and, you know, they're texting and they're like, yeah, me too. And they're not like, they're there, but they're not there, you know? That's how I see the Jupiter Saturn square, where it's like, are we just kind of superficially going through the motions and having conversation with no real depth? You know, every once in a while I like to kind of throw a curveball in there, and somebody will, you know, who I can tell isn't paying attention, they'll be like asking me like, how are things going? And I'll kind of, you know, tell them what's happening, and then I'll throw something crazy in there just to see if they're paying attention. Usually it works. They'll be like, what? And I'll be like, yeah, did you hear anything that I just said? So try that. That might be fun this week. Obviously Jupiter is about humor, so we have to kind of keep our humor about ourselves too. But there can be this tendency of just exchanging, you know, and I think maybe also as we get older, you know, we have more responsibilities, work, kids, relationships, whatever. People are so quick to be like, hey, are you okay? Yeah, everything's good, I'm good, you, same, and like that's the exchange, you know. Here's a crazy idea. Pick up the phone and call your friends. You know, even crazier idea, don't pick up the phone at all unless you're going to call them and tell them that you want to hang out in person and go for a walk, right? Write somebody a letter. Put a lot of thought into it. Make an effort. I think it's going to go a lot further than just kind of quick conversation that's really surfacey, and it's kind of void of any real emotional connection or feeling. And be mindful that there can be legal or educational issues this week. That can happen given Jupiter's traditional rulership over legal matters and education. And this could be a time where these areas of life face significant challenges, and they require some sense of restructuring. All right? Great. So the square is going to be happening at 17 degrees, all right, which is a Leo degree. So it deals with leaders, creators, children, romantic partners, self-expression, self-employed, the stock market, actors, performers, artists, that kind of stuff. So I definitely feel like that's going to be like a little bit more of an emphasis. Maybe some of us are feeling creatively blocked. I think a lot of us are having some relationship turbulence. I know you don't want to hear that, but I think that's part of this as well, because as Jupiter is squaring Saturn, we also have Venus coming in for the square. So there is going to be a Venus-Saturn opposition, which can represent this separation from the things we love, the things we want, and whether that's like, you know, your romantic partner is getting on a plane and they're going to be in the other side of the country for the next couple of days, you're not physically together, or you're feeling like a partner's distracted, they're not giving you affection, you know, they're not kind of there, they're not checked in. Obviously, Venus isn't totally happy in Virgo, so there is this sense of being a little bit more critical in relationships and kind of feeling the effects of like, man, like this is taking work to kind of maintain. And then Jupiter T-squares that. So really, communication bridges the gaps in intimacy this week. If you can communicate through distance, challenges, illness, anything like that, a little bit of communication is going to go a long way. And that's a positive way of being able to work through this. I think any astrologer would say just kind of general blanket, you know, kind of terms. If Mercury's retrograde in Leo, there is going to be more drama in romantic relationships and with children and younger people and people who are kind of casually seeing. But then you throw a Mercury, you know, being the dispositor of the square in the mix. And like, yeah, I think a lot of people are choosing to separate, you know, through being evasive and not communicating. Some of you guys might be noticing you're dating somebody or you're seeing somebody and it's just kind of trailing off. Like, you know, there was a lot of excitement at first and then there's not as much communication, or they're not as responsive, or then they're not making plans. And that could be some kind of slow dissolve of the Venus-Saturn opposition. And so the square to Jupiter and Mars could make people really angry, or they could be texting or calling and being like, what's going on? Where are you? So it can be a little bit of a cat and mouse game for communication with some of these aspects that are kind of going down. Now, I've read to you guys the Sabian symbol for 18 degrees of Gemini. It is connected to the two Chinese men speaking to a Western crowd. Essentially, this is interpreted as some kind of cultural or intellectual exchange. So it could be highlighting communication across different cultures or intellectual landscapes, suggesting a need for understanding and integration diverse viewpoints. This could literally be communication breakdown, you know, due to, you know, translation issues. It could be not having the same kind of philosophy from culture to culture. Reading different scripture, interpreting different scripture, conflict revolving around beliefs. So that's creating some kind of tension, and like definitely you're going to see a lot of people who are going to be arguing and kind of having conflict revolving around, well, this is my religious belief, this is what the Bible says versus, you know, what your religious texts say, and like the back and forth of that. I do feel like this is setting up for some pretty tense situations revolving around conflict of information, which could lead to some kind of violence, conflict of ideas and beliefs, conflict of religious beliefs as well. And a lot of the anger with Jupiter Mars is stemming from the fact that it's feeling like Saturn is silent, that certain leaders aren't touching on or discussing or talking about why these perpetual wars keep continuing in certain countries, and like the impact that that is having on everybody. You may see some religious figures coming out and flat out condemning certain countries this week. I think that may happen, if not already. We may also see, with Venus in opposition to Saturn, you know, some really challenging either job, economic, or, you know, financial numbers kind of coming out, and like that being major headlines over the next week. And that is also making an impact, and people are kind of like, well, you know, does anybody have a comment on this? Do you have anything you want to say? And seeing a little bit of evasiveness with wanting to, you know, touch on these things, or being really optimistic and trying to just quickly move on and smooth things over in hopes that, you know, people will kind of buy that information. So be mindful of whose advice you get. This can also be about feeling out of place or unique. Because it does talk about, you know, two Chinese men being in a Western crowd, obviously speaking Chinese in a different culture. So it might be reflecting feeling different or unique in your own environment, you know, kind of feeling like a foreigner in your own country. And it could resonate with the themes, you know, kind of connected to one's ideas or growth. And you might kind of feel out of sync with the broader context. And I found myself doing this last week. I'm like, am I speaking English? You know, not in a literal sense, but like talking to somebody and then being like, you do not understand what I'm saying to you. And then having like that epiphany that's like, no, do not school this person. Like, just be kind, just like let it go, you know? God, it makes me think of that viral video. I don't even remember who it is. I know it's like a podcaster, and she's interviewing this female rapper. And she was talking to her. She goes, well, we're doing this interview. Like, I'm interviewing you because I want to know more about you. And she's like, well, what do you know about me? And she's like, well, I know you're a musician. And the female rapper is like, what are you talking about? I'm not that. She's like, I'm a rapper. I'm an artist. I'm a mogul. I'm not a magician. She thought the girl who was interviewing her called her a magician. But she's like, no, you're a musician. You make no. She's like, I'm not a magician. So it reminds me of that square. That's like, is this crazy town? Like, did you hear what I was saying? I'm sure some of you guys get that reference, but that's what it reminds me of trying to kind of communicate and get a point across. And then there are some situations where you're going to want to look at people and go, you are absolutely right. Have a great day. And like, that's really what's going to kind of help propel this forward, unfortunately, in some situations. All right. So set realistic goals, right? Balance exploration with reflection, deepen your communication if and when possible. Be mindful of legal or educational things. Take extra time to review that stuff, especially if you guys are planning to go to a college, if you're applying to something, if you're considering starting a lawsuit or dealing with a lawsuit. If you're also, planning travel, take heed. This week, things can get a little bumpy. And when in doubt, maybe meditate on the Sabian symbol and ask yourself, what am I missing? What am I not understanding, right? Now, here is the finale before I get to the week ahead. Here's my hot take on the blessings, because I opened this video being a little bit more optimistic maybe than some other astrologers you guys are going to watch. My hot take on the blessing is that, yes, there is going to be 2 squares that we're going to be seeing. One that's going to be happening on December 24th. I know, just in time for Christmas. Merry Christmas, you get a Saturn-Jupiter square. There's going to be a lot of people who are probably going to be a little disappointed on Christmas Day, as much as I hate to say that. So this will be the 2nd square, okay? So Jupiter will now be retrograde, and Saturn will be direct. So Saturn's going to have a whole lot more kind of a say in this situation when we have the 2nd square. So we have the square now in August. We integrate. We learn that, okay, we can't go as fast as we want. We're going to take our time. We're going to strategize. And then, boom, we get to the end of December. Saturn is squaring Jupiter again, and look at what's happening at the same time. This is actually after the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. Mutual reception between Jupiter and Mercury. They're in each other's signs. Fixing a T-square to Saturn. Wow. So this is definitely going to be some challenges with traveling. I keep telling people I'm like, traveling during the holidays in December, even end of November into December, no bueno. But this in particular, issues I think revolving around, it could be international travel, planes, legal matters. We're going to hear lots of stuff about, stuff that's going on in the court system, I would assume. But that's the next square. And Saturn, I think, is going to be a little bit more powerful here with Jupiter retrograde. Right now, we're a little bit more optimistic, but there's another kind of reconvening that's going to happen at the end of the year. Okay, so let me take you to the 3rd square. The 3rd square will be happening next year. So, planets retrograde, so they go through a process. And the 3rd one is going to be around June 15th, 2025. Trying to get in the habit of showing you guys the cycle so you realize that things aren't just happening on one day. They take a while to play out. So here's the 2nd square. It's going to be on the 15th. There we go. So we have got now Saturn is in Aries. Okay, so this is a sign that it has some challenges in. We'll talk about that later in the year. And Jupiter is in its exaltation. So Jupiter's got a lot of strength here, all right, because it's expanding in Cancer, emotions, home, family, all that stuff. But this is the final square. And now the squares are happening in cardinal signs, which means the expansion and contraction is going to be between individuals and home and family, or actions and identity and kind of, being on your own and things revolving around your past, your emotions, your safe space. I think of like Cancer as kind of like the shell. So we've got 2 more squares to kind of get through. I recommend working with this one, maybe making a note, hey, at the end of December, I'm going to reconvene and kind of see how this goal is kind of playing out and how I'm doing, finding the middle ground between these 2 signs. Now, here's the silver lining, okay? The silver lining is that next year, we will have the trine. So after a series of Saturn-Jupiter squares, Then we're going to see right around mid-November of 2025 that there will be a trine. Actually, it's right around here. All right. So Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter will be retrograde. Yes, I know. Saturn will be retrograde. Yes, I know. But they're still in a trine to each other. And believe it or not, I went through, they will not, it does not look like they exactly trine each other. They come into range. They'll both be at 25 degrees, but they are not going to, they're not going to exactly trine each other. So they get really, really close, and then Jupiter starts to retrograde, and then Saturn starts to retrograde. So kind of mid-November, you'll start to realize what I was working so hard for, what I was kind of trying to, you know, make happen and grow, it finally, I think, starts to blossom. But likely it's blossoming more in the area of Cancer in your chart. So it's going to be Jupiter going into your 4th house, and obviously it's ruled by the moon, so it's sensitive and emotional. Trining Saturn around 25 degrees. And this could be better news for everything globally as well. We could see, you know, things kind of start to improve a little bit at the end of 2025. Water signs are about intuition. Okay, so there is going to be more sensitivity, better range, you know, and kind of hold on our emotions. We've matured a little bit when it comes to our emotions. And Jupiter in the sign of Cancer can talk about growth and abundance and richness, especially for specific countries. Jupiter is wealth, abundance, and blessings. So even though some things are being held up or delayed this week, maybe some things are ending, I'm telling you, I really think it's going to bring something much, much better. And then finally, we will see the Jupiter-Saturn trine exact, and that's going to be at the end of August of 2026. So I know that this is a ways in the future, but I just want to give you guys something optimistic to kind of keep in mind. And this is going to be an interesting trine because we're going to have Jupiter in Leo. Okay. And it's going to be trining Saturn in Aries. And that'll be right around the end of August. So, yeah, basically things are changing, guys. That's the name of the game. Let's go ahead and get into the week ahead. I want to talk to you guys about what is happening. And let's start with 2024. How about that? There we go, 2024. All right. So we're going to be starting on the 18th. All right. So those of you guys who are watching on Sunday, happy Sunday to my Sunday crew. I hope you guys are doing well. We're waking up this morning with the energies building into what will eventually be the full moon, which is happening tomorrow, okay? So we're feeling that right now. Depending on how early you're up in the morning, you know, the moon is starting to separate from Pluto. So pretty much overnight, moon has been conjunct Pluto, which can represent a big kind of emotional shift. The one thing that you want to watch for that's kind of going on is that while the moon goes through the sign of Aquarius, it's trining the south node, so it's able to kind of help us kind of touch base on past relationships, friendships, connections, support from other people. It is also coming into a trine with Jupiter and Mars. So in my opinion, Sunday is actually a pretty social day. It feels like a very fun day. Even though, yes, Venus is starting to come into opposition with Saturn, not yet. This grand air trine that's kind of setting up really makes me feel like, you know, getting out, being with friends, connecting with other people, networking, you know, kind of doing things with other people is going to bring some sense of like change and fulfillment. Moon trine Jupiter feels expansive. It feels, you know, really optimistic, really positive, great for, you know, book clubs and hanging out with your neighbors and, you know, going out and being active, especially because it's very close to Mars. So that's the good side of the lunar transits today. The challenging thing that's happening is that we have been experiencing the Mercury square Uranus, and that actually really started very early this morning. I am filming this right now on Friday, so I don't know what could happen or may have happened. I'm only going to speculate that probably we're going to see some more topsy-turvy things happening with communications. Very similar to what we saw around the 21st of July when the square was just kind of happening in the pre-shadow. Specifically, this is at a 27 now. So before it was at a 26, this is at a 27. So we're going to see multiple events. You'll see things in doubles, okay? I think about, obviously Uranus and Taurus is going to be about crypto and exchanges and electricity, and it's about the earth, and it's things kind of connecting to destabilization of financial resources or values of some kind. So Mercury in Leo is more going to be talking about, okay, we're now reviewing or revising, well, how much money did that cost airlines? Did that cost, with internet issues or companies that had, staff that were not able to work? Like, we might be starting to get more data and information about what happened there. Anyway, not an easy day for communication. If Mercury is the mind and it's retrograde, we're already kind of so deep in our own stuff internally that sometimes it's difficult to communicate out in the world. And with the squares to Uranus, it means that there is pivoting, changing circumstances that kind of makes us feel like we're a little anxious. And it can make our mind kind of feel like it's on fire. So, everybody's had a little bit too much of coffee or energy drinks and you're kind of on edge. That's kind of how this feels. So you can be a little kind of mentally fried with this aspect. 27 also deals with cars, traveling, and communication. So there can be some kind of breakdown that's happening with that. People kind of wigging out maybe about some changes that are continuing maybe to happen in the auto industry, or things that are going to be happening where there's some friction between two people, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, and some drama that can be kind of coming up in values in relationships, or, drama over, investments and money, because fifth house is gambling and speculative. I'm wondering if we're going to see some other kind of internet issue or some kind of outage that's going to impact, maybe a performance or a big show or an arena, like a stage, right, Leo, or if it's going to be impacting like a big casino or something like that. In the background, I think about Venus being the dispositor of Uranus, and Venus is opposing Saturn. So something's about to go down that's going to have a big impact on the service industry. Venus in Virgo is hair, nails, animals. It is going to bars. It's things like that. It's all kind of directly connected. So we might hear about more layoffs. We might hear about more issues that's going on economically that's kind of impacting gig workers. I think that's something else to kind of watch for. And I'm wondering if there's going to be some more union stuff going on as the moon goes in further into Aquarius and opposes this and squares Uranus, because Aquarius can be about unions that are working with or representing creatives and some kind of financial kind of conflicts that could be kind of going on. So that's possible. But yeah, shocking news and information, sudden changes. Think back to the first time this happened around July 21st last month. Now we're going to see the Cazimi come through. Essentially, let's go back. So the Cazimi has to be within, some astrologers say 17 minutes. Some use, about within a degree. Just know that the conjunction is brewing where the superior kind of position between Mercury and the sun are coming together. So Mercury's in front of the sun, relaying a message. The sun's in its domicile. I think that's a good sign. With Mercury being the ruler of Mars and Jupiter, I do feel like this is going to be about leaders coming out and like making comments and being like, this is where we're taking action, or this is what we're doing. And like, yeah, if there is going to be some kind of actions relating to war, I do believe it would be this week, because of the full moon and also because of the squares that we're seeing between Venus, which wants diplomacy, and she's kind of in her, obviously in her fall in Virgo. So there's some issues there. But some really kind of loud ideas and, really kind of putting yourselves out there and being like really forthcoming and like confident with ideas. This conjunction takes place at 26 degrees, which is about values, money, resources, food. People who are going to start talking about issues involving food and or farmers, or people speaking up for that because of the squares to Uranus and Taurus, which could be collections and individuals that are coming together to kind of farm or do agricultural work. We may see somebody big who gets kind of a lot of recognition for bringing this out into, online or into our awareness. But generally, the Sun-Mercury Cazimi, it's like an epiphany. We have a download. This is the midway point between the Mercury retrograde, and if you don't know what's kind of getting reworked or what the purpose is or why things feel haywire, maybe something's gone missing, this is generally when that information comes through. So that's going to happen just before the full moon in Aquarius. And this is also still in a square to Uranus. So it's like some shocking news that's coming out. People are like, what? So that'll be right before the full moon. And we are also going to be seeing that this Venus-Saturn opposition is taking place too. Ooh, man, there's just so much stuff going on here. All right, so we go into the PM tonight, and we're not going to see Venus exactly oppose Saturn until what appears to be very early Monday morning, the 19th. I'm eyeballing it. Okay, yeah, right around there. So Venus and Saturn will oppose very early. Look at this is also at 17 degrees. Okay, that's a Leo degree too. So we've got the Leo retrograde, right? We had the Jupiter-Saturn square at 17. We have Venus in opposition to Saturn. Got a lot of slack for this, but this is literal astrology. Venus in opposition to Saturn means that there is some disappointment or some kind of fall, because Venus is in her fall here, when it comes to some kind of recognition or support from the establishment. This is just the astrology. And then you take it a step further and it squares Jupiter, which makes it even bigger headlines, shocks and surprises, and Mercury is the retrograde. I mean, the dispositor, it's retrograde. I mean, quite literally, the Mercury retrograde Cazimi could be about a change in leadership. You know, I got a lot of crap for saying this, but part of me is like, I really wonder, because this is kind of going on right around the time that we're getting ready to have the debates, not the debates. Well, the debates are coming. The Democratic National Convention. I'm wondering, like, is there going to be a lot of pushback against Kamala Harris, because Venus is in a sign of service. I mean, she's in public service. So I'm wondering if there's going to be some shocks and surprise about that, or there's some kind of changes in direction. You know, maybe she changes her VP. I'm not saying it necessarily needs to be her. It could be, but that could be kind of coming out. So I'm wondering if that's going to happen. So that's going to be really early on the 19th. And then we have the full moon, okay? And this full moon is crazy. I think outside of maybe some of the eclipses, one of the more crazy full moons, which I know I said that last month, but last month was crazy too, guys. So notice right before the full moon, so if you're still following, we are now on the 19th, so this is Monday. The moon will first make an opposition to Mercury. And Mercury, when it's so close to Leo, now it's combust, it's no longer Cazimi, is like mind on fire. What about me? What do I want? Like, it can be very self-consumed with Sun Mercury that close in Leo. And that's going to oppose the moon. So we're so in a tizzy thinking about, you know, what we're doing, what we want, or speaking out about something, or talking over someone, or, you know, not listening, or we're in a rush in some sense, or we're kind of demanding with Jupiter and Mars. It makes an opposition to the moon, and we're going to feel collectively with the moon that's like, wow, it's really hard to feel heard, or, you know, there's a lot going on out there and everybody's kind of got an opinion, and like some people are kind of like melting down over something that's happening. And then the full moon comes at 27, which is a Gemini degree. Okay, so that's going to be right around here. So that'll be in the PM hours on Monday, and then it's going to square Uranus. I did a full moon video on this, so go check it out. But yeah, woo, that's wild. And then you add another layer to this where, you know, T-squares in general, it makes the focal point of the square very, very loud. So we've got two here. We've got Uranus, which is wild, unpredictable, crazy, right? Squaring the full moon. And then we've got Jupiter and Mars, which is very vocal, squaring Saturn and squaring Venus. I think there's going to be some really, really gnarly protests this week. I don't like saying that, but that's kind of the feeling that I get. So, you know, be mindful of like where you live. Be mindful if you're driving in an area where there's an angry mob. Certainly an Aquarius full moon, everybody flies their freak flag when that happens. Everybody can be a little unhinged. But you add that with a square to Uranus and a Mars-Jupiter T-square. Whew, 19 is lit. There is a lot going on. So two really, really big focal points on those squares. You know, the other thing is that Venus in Virgo does deal with health. It deals with accidents and sickness. So with Venus being the retrograde, Venus being connected to the Mercury retrograde, because it rules Virgo, Mercury, There is also going to be some sense of reviewing. It could be like policies or, you know, like people giving advice or talking about, you know, public health ordinances and, you know, things that are going on revolving around that. And I think that square to Jupiter and Mars is exactly why we've seen like a lot of hysteria in the media with that over the last couple of days. So this is the very first Jupiter-Saturn square on the 19th, by the way. So see, it hits 1726, 1727. So this is almost exact during the full moon. Wild stuff. Wild, wild, wild stuff. And Venus is almost exact too. Wow. And everything is either in a Leo degree or in a Gemini degree, which I'm going to double down on that. I really feel like whatever's going on with Jupiter and Leo is pretty significant. So give me your stories. Let me know what happens on Monday and Tuesday. Thankfully, after the afternoon full moon, you know, the moon's going to shift into Pisces, total vibe shift. When the moon goes into Pisces, we're a little bit more cautious. We're a little bit more reflective. We are kind of more behind the scenes. We retreat a little bit. We want rest or meditation or music or something that's soothing. That's generally what we want. So you will feel that shift in the PM hours, and you're going to see a pretty unaspected moon for the most part, at least until we get into Tuesday the 20th. So yeah, Manic Monday much? That's very much what Monday feels like. Good day to play hooky. All right, so we get into Tuesday the 20th. So the moon is still in Pisces. All right, so it's hanging out here. And when moon's in Pisces, I want to see what's going on with Neptune. I know it's still retrograde. I want to see what's going on with Jupiter. I know that it's been in a square with Venus and a conjunction to Mars. So I know there's some disruptions in relationships and some intense communication. And maybe we are now reflecting on that as the moon is going through Pisces. It's going to keep moving through there. And we're going to see a return of that same damn T-square that we saw that was highlighted during the full moon. So watch this. Moon's going to come into conjunction with Saturn here, okay, in the PM hours. And it's going to start conjuncting Saturn, where usually there is I need to think about this. I need to reflect. I need to be alone. You know, I need to sleep on it. I don't want to talk about it. That's what you're being encouraged to do, right? But what's going to happen is it's going to start squaring Jupiter and Mars. You're going to have people who are going to be wanting to talk. You know, they want to hammer out those issues. You're getting bombarded with emails. You know, there is some need to travel, changing of plans of sorts, and then it's going to oppose Venus. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of people going, my plane's been delayed. You know, I'm not going to be there for another 12 hours, or I'm trying to rent a car, but, you know, like, I can't get a rental. Like, I'm doing the best I can. Like, that's kind of the way I see this. Obviously not for everybody, but, you know, look at where Jupiter is in your chart. That is going to be kind of saying to you, okay, are you going to hurry up, or are you going to pause and you're going to reflect before you make a move? And I would say probably a little bit better to pause and reflect. Because it looks like whatever you're hoping to achieve or what you're reaching for or whatever's changing with a relationship or a financial matter, you got to kind of look at it and go, okay, what am I learning here? Like, is it best to just let this go? Let it pass. Then what else do we see on the 21st? No, we're still on the 20th. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Communication, travel, and weather changes. That's what I have for Monday. And we're already in the PM hours. So overnight into the 21st on Wednesday, the moon's going to pass Saturn, oppose Venus, and square Mars. Ooh, I bet there's going to be a lot of people being like, why didn't you come home last night? Where were you? Why didn't you answer your phone? What's going on? And, you know, I mean, with these squares that are brewing, I could definitely see a lot of people losing their phones. I could definitely see a lot of people that, you know, drop their phone in a pool, or there's some kind of outage, or there's issues communicating or connecting. But overnight, the moon will be in between Saturn and Neptune. Now, I kind of consider that besieged, because Saturn really gives us a hard time. He really limits something. And Neptune makes things really confusing or kind of distorted, or, you know, there can be issues gaining clarity. So we kind of feel like on the 21st, we're kind of like in a fishbowl. So this is Monday. And one thing you want to make sure you don't do is don't hit the snooze button. I could see a lot of people oversleeping or kind of being in a daydream or not paying attention. Losing track of time is very easy when moon is between Saturn and Neptune, and then it squares Jupiter and Mars. We go, oh my God, I'm late. Should have left 20 minutes ago. We get in the car, we rush, and then the moon squares Jupiter and Mars, and it opposes Venus. Guys, accidents, okay? When you're driving, making mistakes when it comes to sending emails too quickly, when we're transferring money, when we're trying to move money between accounts, or we're trying to pay payroll or something, we get distracted or not paying attention, we make mistakes. Do not rush on the 21st. Take your time and know that there can, like I said, be some sort of travel delays that are happening because of water or other issues like that. A lot of people are going to be like, what is going on? I have observed every single time the moon goes through Pisces recently, when it's between Saturn and Neptune, even if it's not opposing anything or squaring anything, I'm like, this is clown world. That kind of 24-hour period generally is pretty crazy, some of the stuff that we see in the world. And there's also a lot of stuff that can be fabricated or manipulated that's put out there as well. And I think this is going to be really hard to differentiate and tell fact from fiction. And I think it's going to be numbers relating, because Virgo is data, revolving around like job numbers and poll numbers and, you know, money that's being given for this and a candidate that's promising that. Like, oof, I don't know about the 21st. That seems like very, you know, like kind of like a car salesman, you know, like the guy who's trying to give you all the bells and whistles and telling you it's a great deal, and you kind of get like greased into buying the car, and then you're like, oh, now I realize that I overpaid for this or that. So be mindful that there can be a lot of people who are smooth talking, trying to convince you of things or trying to suggest things are a certain way. And like, the truth is, we really don't know. You know, we're better off just kind of hanging tight. When in doubt, sleeping on it or meditating on it. Just realize that we kind of feel like we're floating most of the day into the afternoon on the 21st. Something else that I noticed here is we're going to see a couple 29s. So we're going to have the moon and Neptune hit 29. Okay, it's going to be around the PM hours, around dinner time. And that'll come together and quincunx the sun at 29. So whenever we see 29s, it means that something's wrapping up, it's completing. For me, I look at how this is sextiling Pluto, right? Because it's about a degree off from Capricorn. So this is sextiling Pluto, and it's forming a yod to the sun. This is the same one that I said last week. When Mercury goes retrograde back and forth through there, it's going to be important information. And I said it's going to be information that we're going to hear about kings and rulers and leaderships. It could be about royals or whatever. But I was like, there's going to be some important announcements about Trump, and that has happened in this last week. Now there's talk about whether or not, you know, you're seeing certain news stations that are now coming out talking about, yeah, you know, we assume that he's gonna be sentenced and sent to jail in September. And that happened right when we were seeing Mercury back into Leo just the last couple of days. So I wonder, is this going to be something else revolving around that? Why? Pisces is prison. It is things revolving around incarceration. It is hidden. And it does deal with Saturn as, you know, paying some sort of time, and that's making an aspect exactly to his ascendant. So do I wonder, is there more stuff coming out revolving around Trump? Maybe. It's possible. What else? All right, so then we're going to see, after this separates, the moon in the PM hours is going to drop to Aries. Totally different energy. Late degrees of Pisces to Aries is like, a lot of people are going to be like, what's going on? Why do I want to go to the gym on Wednesday night? You know, suddenly you have a lot more kind of like energy because it's moving into a Mars sign. So it's going to be activating this Mars-Jupiter conjunction. It's still conjunct by a couple of degrees. So it really brings up communication, running, sharing, running errands, writing, you know, things like that. Obviously, Mars is starting to come into a square with Venus, so it can kind of talk about it like a little bit of friction, where there's a little bit of a bite in how we communicate with some people, and actions have consequences this week. You guys will see this all week long because of the squares and the oppositions to Saturn. So something that usually wouldn't upset somebody can be, you know, be seen as very offensive right now, or people can be taking things personally, or things can be said where it creates real fractures in relationships with people. And it's not just what we're saying, but how we're saying it. And sometimes with like Mars and Jupiter, there is this kind of like holier than thou mentality, the I know best and I'm gonna, you know, attack you with my, you know, with my intelligence type of vibe. And so people can get a little challenging with that particular conjunction brewing under this moon. But nevertheless, the moon in Aries does make us feel, you know, capable of getting out and doing something and being on our own. So at nighttime, we might notice a little boost in energy. It looks like the moon's going to come into conjunction with the North Node, and that's going to happen very early morning on the 22nd. That's going to be Thursday. So we wake up in the morning with the moon conjunct the North Node. So just make a note of what is happening on Thursday morning. Whatever you're doing is like, it may feel destined, you know, or you're supposed to be doing this thing. You're supposed to be working on this thing or, you know, being independent in some way. Once again, Mars is the ruler, and now we see Mars in a square with Venus. So where Venus was in opposition to Saturn, where we felt some kind of separation from what we want or another person, or we weren't feeling totally fulfilled, the whole purpose of Saturn in Pisces is to say, you know what, sometimes absence makes the heart grow fonder. We don't have to be on top of each other all the time. That's the lesson of South Node in Libra. If we're doing our own thing and we're being independent, you know, we have the opportunity to appreciate other people and come together once we've kind of gotten our stuff done. So the fact that now Mars is squaring Venus, it's also saying that there can be some conversations where people are speaking up and finally feeling more capable later in the week, you know, kind of Thursday, Friday, of being like, look, this hasn't been working for me, or I don't like this. And like, there's an opportunity to engage in a way where, you know, it can be productive. The challenge is that we got a lot of fire in the sky right now. Okay. And I do think that as the Aries moon continues on and it starts trining Leo, you're going to see some kind of drama that's going to kind of pop up here a little bit. But all in all, you know, early AM moon North Node conjunction, I feel like I'd be paying attention to what I'm doing. We're going to see later in the day, there you go, that the moon is going to start coming into a sextile with Jupiter and Mars. And by the way, Venus and Mars in a square isn't necessarily bad. It's just that the dispositor for both of these planets is retrograde, square Uranus. So there's going to be a lot of drama going on in like situationships or dealing with your kids or your creative ideas that are still kind of getting reworked right now. But Venus and Mars in a square can also create a little bit of cat and mouse, a little bit of friction. You know, it can be that there is some chemistry and kind of going back and forth. Can't wait to see you. Not available tonight, but I'll let you know. You know, like that kind of vibe, where you're still kind of keeping the momentum going, but it doesn't have to be something where you're always kind of connected and communicating. Sun goes into Virgo on the 22nd, so happy Virgo season to you Virgo, Sun, Moon, and Rising people. We will then have, with that, by the way, this is kind of worth mentioning, the Pluto Sun quincunx, right? A little wide for this to be a yod, but still kind of there with Neptune at 29. So the Sun goes into Virgo. We're going to have several weeks of focusing on health, organization, our to-do list, about service, about bettering ourselves, about being a little bit more productive, kind of getting into the swing of things and feeling a little bit more grounded, getting into routine, which is so appropriate for like end of August. A lot of people go back to school during that time. We're kind of getting into new routines as kids are going back to school, or we're getting, you know, back to our courses, or, you know, kind of getting a little bit situated with our schedule again. And so I like with the Sun in Virgo and the Moon in Aries that's very much like, okay, time to kind of get into action, you know, kind of time to get back down to business. We will see the Moon in Aries come into later in the day. It'll start sextiling Jupiter and Mars. Super productive. Great for if you've got a writing project, you got a website. Maybe you are also, you know, wanting to just like go for a walk or work out at night. I actually really like Wednesday and Thursday evening for like fitness related things, because I feel like that could be really good with that, some of the Aries moon aspects that we're having. And this is about feeling more confident and assertive and direct and being able to share what's on our mind. And finally, these two planets are starting to break away from Saturn. So I feel like by the time we get to like, you know, kind of like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you know, things are kind of chilling out a little bit. Maybe more so Thursday, Friday. But all right. So then this is going to take us to the 23rd. And in the morning on the 23rd, the moon, first thing in the morning, conjuncts Chiron. And I want you guys to pay attention to this. Okay, moon Chiron, ouch, that hurt my feelings. You know, vulnerabilities coming up, feeling isolated, separated, you know, kind of ignored, or, you know, dealing with some kind of emotional wounding. This is ruled by Mars, and Mars is conjunct Jupiter still, square Venus, and square Saturn. As I was going through these squares this week, I had a conversation with somebody, and they said something along the lines of being like, you know, you just shouldn't care what other people think, because as long as it isn't something that you believe in, then it's not true. And that was more about like criticism, personal criticism, like stuff like that. And I thought about it, and I was like, that's just something that somebody says to you just so like you don't get upset, or like you don't take things personally. And she was like, I know you don't believe me when I'm telling you this, but like genuinely, like let things roll off your back. Like things that people say, let it roll off your back. Don't take it personally. And I put a post on X where I was like, sticks and stones will break your bones, and words this week can hurt you and other people. And maybe you've experienced that, but I kind of feel like this may be that turning point where there can be this sense of being like, you know what? People are going to say what people are going to say. You know, if I take every little criticism from my boss, my partner, you know, my family, my parents, my kids, like whatever, you know, personally, then you're always just going to be like at war, kind of, you know, raged within yourself. So this can be now you're diffusing some of the squares that's been happening to Mars. Now you can heal it. And it's starting to now sextile Jupiter and Mars. So walking, writing, speaking, sharing, learning, things like that can kind of help you break out of it. I like Mars and Jupiter in Gemini for tapping. If you guys do like the EFT technique, or even like breath work, that can be really helpful as well. So if you're kind of working on trying to heal some emotional stuff that's coming up, might be something you want to consider. And the moon is going to trine Mercury. And so this is why I really feel like this has the opportunity for there to be some healing therapeutic conversations. Like if there's been some rough stuff that's gone on this last week, or even leading up into this week, I actually really like Friday for being able to squash it, being able to work through it. And with Mercury getting ready to go direct pretty soon, I feel like it's like saying, okay, I reflect on this thing. Maybe I was being a little dramatic. You know, this is how I feel. I got my feelings hurt. Ego got checked, you know, inner child got hurt, you know, and you can actually work through it. And it could be really helpful for some relational issues. So I would kind of reserve Friday for being able to squash some of that stuff. All right, so then we're going to see the moon will ingress into Taurus. And as soon as it does, it's going to square Pluto. And this is in the PM hours on Friday. Friday gets a little moody in the PM hours. Moon square Pluto is pretty quick, but still it's bringing up Venus, which is now coming out of a square with Mars, and it's coming into an opposition with Neptune. And when the moon's in Taurus, we want to be comfortable, we want security, we want pleasure, we want what tastes good and what feels good. And financial stuff comes up with this lunar transit. And with the square to Pluto, it means that there could be some feelings of being like, oh, there's stuff changing, and like, how does that make me feel in terms of security? Quick moving, it'll pass pretty quickly. I think what helps with this transit on Friday is the fact that the moon is going to trine the sun. So this is a nice aspect. This means that, you know, we've got our emotions in alignment with our actions, and there is going to be an earth trine between these two in the sky. So it feels very productive. We're working on something. We're building something. Yeah, maybe we feel like we're afraid of change, but we're like, you know what? It's time to get the show on the road. I think with Venus and also the sun now in Virgo, there is this sense of being like, okay, there's been a few things that have been kind of rocky in the last week or two with the retrograde, but now we're kind of recognizing what we need to fix, how we can kind of better arrange our lives and our schedules, how we can better express ourselves as well. So the sun and the moon trine is beautiful. Obviously, this is ruled by Venus. So Venus isn't really doing anything. She's not quite in her trine to Uranus yet. She's not quite in her opposition to Neptune yet. But the Taurus moon will continue, and that's going to be going into Saturday, the 24th. So when we wake up on Saturday, the moon is in Taurus still. And we're starting to see now the moon is going to be Eventually today, sextiling Saturn. It looks like it's going to start coming into a trine with Venus. And that's pretty much it. Friday into Saturday, kind of calmer days. So let's look at that. It looks like the sun and the moon have already trined. Okay, so now we've got throughout Saturday the 24th, it's going to pick up in the PM hours, the sextile to Saturn right here. And it's going to start picking up into, looks like Sunday, the trine to Uranus. Okay, so nothing's really kind of going on. Mercury's now at 22, so it's still retrograde. We have yet to see the moon square Mercury. That's going to be more on Sunday. So Saturday's kind of a chill day as well. We don't have too much going on there. I think you guys will probably really like the fact that, you know, the moon is starting to come into a trine with Venus. And I also think that the sun and the moon together, very productive days on Saturday and Sunday. All right, so then this is Sunday the 25th in the morning. And we've got the moon that's doing all kinds of stuff, okay? So first things first, know that plans are not really going to go according to plan on this day. The reason why I say this is, you know, when the moon comes into conjunction with Uranus, there is this emotional kind of destabilizing going on. It's like, we thought we were going to do this, we were going to do that. We thought we were going to have this for dinner. It turns out we don't have any of that. We got to come up with another plan. I use that because Taurus is food, but it can be resources, values, stuff like that. So when it conjuncts Uranus, it feels startled. And it's also going to square Mercury. So this could also be another communication issue day. How there's news coming up that people are anticipating, waiting for the markets to open, then on the 26th, and some changes revolving around, you know, things that have been kind of happening or news that's come up over the last couple of days or over the weekend before we get to the Monday morning transits. So we're going to have the moon square Mercury in Leo, which I feel like it makes it very difficult to communicate. There is some rigidness with these squares where we may not see eye to eye, or, you know, we're kind of struggling with, well, how much money do I want to spend? You know, going to the movies, going out, doing something, having fun. And so there are some changes in the way that we're looking at fun and recreation and the impact that that's having on our finances. Now, this could be a good thing. It could be like, you know, I don't feel like I need to go out to a bar today. I'm going to go to the park, you know, and I'm going to have a picnic and I'm going to have a different experience. And it's because I'm changing and rearranging the way that I look at my goals when it comes to socializing or being with other people. So look for a change of plans is kind of the vibe that I'm getting with this. Thankfully, once we start to break away from the square to Mercury, there's a little sweet spot here where the moon's going to hit Uranus, and it's going to trine Venus. And that's going to be in like the mid-afternoon on Sunday the 25th. And this is a great time to be like, okay, I'm going to rearrange the furniture. I'm going to get some new plants. I'm going to do some gardening. I'm thinking about switching something up in the home. Like, let's get some new paint color, or like, let's turn this into a do-it-yourself project, because Venus in Virgo wants something to work on. So I like the trine. And I actually really like the sextile to Neptune. So it can be great for those of you guys who are wanting to, you know, like refinish furniture, or if you're wanting to do something kind of like fun, something that you have to do kind of physically at home. It's a nice way to kind of use that transit. And with the moon trine Venus, you know, we all feel a little bit sweeter. We feel a little bit more harmonious. We definitely feel like, okay, maybe we're doing something different and unusual, moon conjunct Uranus, or maybe you're trying a new cuisine and you're like, I didn't think I was going to like this food, but turns out you really like it, you know? Changes and being okay with change and kind of leaning into relationship, financial, or resource change of some kind. That seems to be the theme there. Now, once again, Venus is the dispositor, right? And so Venus is in a trine with both the moon and Uranus, so that's good. But after this, very similar to what we experienced on the full moon, where Venus was in opposition to Saturn and something felt far away, now Venus is inching her way towards an opposition with Neptune. That's going to be more so next week, so you don't need to worry about that yet. But she is starting to come into an opposition with Neptune, so there can feel like some major critical turning points coming up still with relationships, probably until we're out of Mercury in Leo. That's kind of my thought process. And what we'll see late on Sunday on the 25th is that then the moon will pass the conjunction to Uranus, It will move into Gemini, and that's going to be happening late in the PM hour. And when it does, it is going to trine Pluto. So lots of opportunities for breakthroughs, ideas, late night writing, late night studying, connecting, communicating, that kind of stuff. And we'll see a trine between Pluto and the South Node. So there could definitely be a kind of, working on something into the later hours on Sunday. That's very possible. Obviously, you guys know just looking at this that, Monday and Tuesday with Moon hitting these planets, squaring this stuff again, it's going to create more of some of this jumbled things that we have seen throughout this last week. So you're gonna see that kind of pop up a little bit as well. But that's really the transits at a glance for this week. Please consider subscribing to my channel. You guys will get all kinds of astrological content. We do long format everything. We've got horoscopes that will be coming out probably in this next week for you guys. I'm also working on some eclipse webinars as well, because now that we're in Virgo season, the next full moon that we're going to have is going to be a lunar eclipse in Pisces. So that's big. But I'm also working on a top secret thing that I'm going to try to get out for you guys at the end of the month. I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch, but I'm trying to work on something that I want to bring to the channel for you guys that's going to be kind of webinar-ish as well. So make sure you're subscribed. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Consider sharing it with someone else, especially if they love astrology. And I always appreciate your comments. Even though I can't get back to everybody, I want to say thank you. I do read them. And if you want to see more about this particular Saturn-Jupiter square, I talk about this in the August horoscopes for 2024 and go really in depth into that. And I think we did like a preview also of this in the past. So there's plenty of information on the channel. You can check that out. Listen to your rising sign, your sun sign, and your moon sign. But we've been talking about Pisces and Gemini all week, so you kind of already know where the tug of war is going on. Sending you guys lots of good vibes. Be optimistic about this, even if there is a setback or a delay. Know that it's just about kind of getting yourself back up and strategizing how we can have something grow and be sustainable for the long term. All right, if you want to know more about me and my work, check out my links below. You can go to beyondtheveiltarot.com. You can see my courses, you can see my webinars, as well as book a personal reading with me. I'm sending you guys lots of good vibes. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you back here soon. Take care.